Thank you for that, Ron. And yeah, thank you for putting this on. Thank you for everyone for being here. Actually, I learned some from Dustin, Roger, and Bob thus far, and I'm looking forward to the rest of the day. So Tom Santuccio, solution architect with AWS. Been in IT over 20 years in a variety of roles. At the risk of, I guess, aging myself here, I actually worked on Y2K initiatives, so I've been around a while. So ransomware, right? Let me preface this by saying there is no silver bullet for ransomware, right? Or as I tell my kids, no, there's not an app for that yet, as far as we know. Much of what can be done as it relates to ransomware is what we consider basic cyber hygiene, best practices, if you will. High level agenda, right? Just talk about what ransomware is, how we define it, how AWS fits into that, why we have a seat at the table, and the importance of leveraging a framework, right, such as NIST. So what is ransomware, right? At the end of the day, it's malicious code designed to gain unauthorized access to systems and data, encrypt that data to block access of your legitimate users. It's just a different flavor of malware if you think about it, right? And once ransomware has locked users out of their systems and encrypted their sensitive data, that's when the cyber criminals demand a ransom before providing that decryption key to unlock that data. The threat has now evolved to where cyber criminals are stealing the data to be used as an additional threat if the victims do not pay the ransom to decrypt that data. Typically, organizations are completely shut down by an attack, incurring significant costs and a loss of business productivity because basic IT and cybersecurity actions weren't in place. So now we're seeing this idea of a double ransom, right? While that data was encrypted, criminals can exfiltrate that data to their own location, then ransom the victim again, right? Threatening to sell or leak that data without another payment, damaging their reputation. And it's not new, right? Ransomware has been around since the 80s. It's just become more popular, spurred on by the anonymity granted by cryptocurrency. And paying does not guarantee that locked systems will be unlocked or that extracted data will not be exposed. Some entities like the FBI recommend not paying at all. Any payments will only encourage future nefarious behaviors. And some organizations take the calculated risk of paying, hoping to quickly resume normal operations. They hope to reduce the cost of loss, productivity, decrease revenue, exposure of data, and sometimes worse than anything, reputation. So how does it get in, right? I say it's the cybersecurity usual suspects, if you will, right? Those vulnerabilities, right? It's just a flaw in software or hardware design, underlying programming code that allows an attacker to make affected systems do something it wasn't intended to do. The most severe vulnerabilities allow attackers to take complete control over the affected system, running arbitrary code of their choice, right? I think we heard Roger talk about that a little bit. Unpatched vulnerabilities, a huge one. Security misconfigurations, not following best practices, can enable attackers to take a range of actions on a system, disrupting operations, stealing information, lowering security settings, disabling security features, seizing control of it. And it could be something as simple as a default setting, like a preset key or password that is the same on every manufactured piece of hardware that a vendor may put out. They can be introduced gradually. System configuration changes over time. And of course, there's the weak, leak, or stolen credentials, very common, right? Several ways that they get leaked and stolen. Social engineering is one, phishing, malware that does keystroke logging, steals creds from operating systems, browsers, compromised systems that cache them, store them. Saw the video about that one earlier, right? And then developers sometimes put projects in places they shouldn't be, right? Publicly available code sharing sites. They forget they have secrets in there, passwords lost in the code. Also in Amazon S3 buckets, right? Many times you find keys out there. It's no surprise, right, that massive lists of stolen and leaked credentials have been discovered on the internet over the years. In addition to those, right, there's these new high-performance computing clusters and GPU-based password cracking tools. And I don't think I have to be that powerful watching the demo that I saw earlier today. And this has caused the ascent of MFA technology. Although, once again, as I heard from Roger, right, there's a lot more than just MFA. You need to understand it, that it can be hacked. You need to understand the methods to protect yourself. And then social engineering, one of the most widely used methods that we see. We as humans are just not always good at determining if a URL is safe. This is tricking users into making poor trust decisions, including lowering the security posture of a system by changing its settings without understanding what it'll do, or installing malware on a system. And attackers rely on this, right? Just victims being naive about social engineering attacks. And of course, there's insider threats, right? Whether it's albeit a user and admin that just makes a mistake or a poor trust decision that leads to a bad security outcome, a lone wolf insider or company that's trying to steal information, or a mass conspiracy where you have multiple insiders working together to overcome separation of duties. distribute the span of security control, if you will. So why has it been effective, ransomware, right? Well, limited budgets. Attracting and retaining cybersecurity talent is an industry-wide challenge. There's hundreds of thousands of cybersecurity roles in the US alone, millions if you look across the globe. Patching is hard. Many organizations do not patch or take too long to patch the systems when they find vulnerabilities. And there's privileged access management, or PAM, right? Many organizations struggle with this: overly permissive credentials and compromised credentials, not using that principle of least privilege and enforcing that and auditing it over time, most importantly. Many organizations have an open trust model, allows malware to spread, right? Once you're in the network, you have access to lots and lots of resources. And compare this to the recent trends or buzz around zero trust models that you heard about earlier. The security awareness among employees is low, right? Although ransomware has been in the headlines frequently as a high impact risk that businesses should be aware of, still within the ranks of the organization, they don't know a lot about it, how it spreads, how it does the initial compromise. That's how and why social engineering is so effective. And then some organizations are not backing up the data, or they're backing it up and, more importantly, not testing the restores, right? And backup is only as valuable as the restore. And cloud makes this very easier than it has been before, but it still requires investment on organizations and individuals that are responsible for that to really test those and make sure they can back up and restore, more importantly. And then ransomware as a service and commoditized, right? You're no longer required to have technical skills. You can literally go online and buy or rent everything you need to do this. And of course, employees, right? They're busy, they're burdened with a lot of work. How do you upskill them? You're going to give them more work to do, more services or tools to use. It's difficult. So what's the government saying about all this, right? Well, the FBI encourages organizations to report ransomware to law enforcement and to not pay. FBI, in conjunction with the Department of Health and Human Services, actually published a cybersecurity advisory saying hospitals and healthcare providers are about to have a really bad time. And I'm sure you've probably seen that in the news in the past 12 months. A couple of hospitals hit and chose to pay the ransom. U.S. Treasury chimed in and says paying a ransom to sanction hackers could actually be illegal, signaling a crackdown on the fast-growing market for consultants who help organizations pay off cyber criminals. In June, the White House actually weighed in first time, right? Who would have thought that the White House would release a memo discussing things like segmenting networks, patching systems, backing up and testing the restores, creating incident plans, assuming you have one, testing it, and checking your work with third-party penetration testers. The US State Department actually came out and said they're going to offer rewards totaling up to $10 million for information leading to the identification of alleged cyber criminals, especially the hackers behind state-sanctioned breaches of critical infrastructure. So where does AWS fit into all of this? Well, many of you have probably seen this slide before, right? We have this shared responsibility model where AWS is responsible for security of the cloud, customers are responsible for security in the cloud, right? Like I mentioned earlier, the patching, things like PAM, configuration can be difficult. Right? That's where AWS can do that heavy lift. And the more you let AWS do the heavy lift, the taller that orange box gets, right? So shifting that responsibility to AWS. One way users combat and mitigate ransomware is business continuity planning, right? BCP. And that comes down to resiliency, right? You have disaster recovery, which is a critical element of your business continuity plan, enabling the quick resolution of IT operations and minimizing data loss if there was a disaster. And of course, with disasters, it comes down to two things, right? Your RTO, how long does it take to get your application back up, and the RPO, how much data you can lose. And you have your availability, which comes down to your mean time between failures and your mean time to repair, which is often referred to as nines, right? So if I said I had 99.9% availability target, people would say 3 nines, right? But with ransomware, this is different. It's not about the nines anymore. It's binary. It's a 0 or a 1. Can my business recover from someone encrypting and stealing all of my data? This is where we need to stop and change our thinking. Right? It's not about the backups, the restores per se. It's because of that potential exfiltration of data, those double ransoms we're hearing about, the publishing of data. We need to focus our effort on stopping that malware and ransomware from getting in the door. Right? This requires a more holistic security approach, like aligning to a security framework. And a security framework will help an organization to better understand, manage, and reduce its cybersecurity risks. Here in America, by far, we've heard about it prior with Bob, right? The most popular cybersecurity framework is the NIST Cybersecurity Framework. It will assist in determining which activities are most important to assure critical operations and service delivery. In turn, that'll help you to prioritize investments, maximize the impact of each dollar you spend on cybersecurity. And also by providing a common language to address cybersecurity risk management, it's especially helpful in communicating inside and outside the organization. It includes improving communications, awareness, understanding between and among IT, planning, operating units, as well as communicating up senior executives of the organizations. So let's look at how the NIST CSF aligns to AWS services. At the core of NIST, is a set of desired cybersecurity activities and outcomes organized into categories. Right? You have identify. This includes asset management, business environment, governance, risk management strategy, supply chain risk management. Protect includes such things as identity management, access control, awareness and training, data security, information protection and processes, procedures, maintenance, protective technology. Detect includes anomalies and events, security continuous monitoring, and the detection process itself. Respond is comprised of response planning, communications, analysis, mitigation and improvements. And recover includes recovery planning, improvements, and once again, communications. So if we look at identify specifically, right, what processes and assets need protection? Well, to understand your assets, you have to be able to have an inventory of those assets. Well, in AWS, we have Systems Manager Inventory, right, provides that visibility into not only your instances you're running in Amazon, but also on-premise computing, if you have that on-prem data center still. You can use it to collect metadata from your managed instances. You can store that metadata inside S3 buckets and use built-in tools to query the data and quickly determine which instances are running the software and configurations required by your software policy and which instances need to be updated. You can configure this on all your instances by one click. You can configure this across multiple regions, multiple accounts. And then we have config, right? Enables you to assess audit, and evaluate your configurations of your AWS resources. Kind of like a DVR, it continuously monitors and records your resource configurations and allow you to automate the evaluation of recorded configurations against desired configurations. You can review the changes and the relationships between resources, dive into detailed resource configuration histories, and determine your overall compliance against the configuration specified in your guidelines. It enables you to simplify compliance auditing, security analysis, change management, to name a few. In the protect here, right, what safeguards are available for you? Well, we have control tower in organizations, right? It's the easiest way to set up, govern a multi-account AWS environment, which we call a landing zone. It brings ongoing account management, governance, as well as implementing best practices based upon working with thousands of customers as they move to the cloud. Within those organizations, we have service control policies that you can use to manage permissions in your organization. So if you have certain regions that you just don't want users to deploy things to, maybe in EMEA or APJ, you can simply disable that, right? Disable for that organizational unit. If you have a network team, they should be the only one making changes to your firewalls, your security groups. You can simply control that with these policies. We have default sets of policies that are all based on best practices as well that get deployed. And IAM, right, a huge part of Protect, that identity. Of course, we have single sign-on that integrates with many third-party identity providers. So very beneficial, right? You don't want to have multiple identity providers, so use your existing identity provider. So if you think about when an employee may leave your organization, you can terminate their access to your identity provider, and now they no longer have access to AWS. Reduce your risk. We have Access Analyzer now to actually assist with the concept of that least privilege I mentioned earlier. Of course, the VPC technology is all around networking to segregate those workloads to prevent that bad actor from traversing your network. Right? You don't put your production, different users have access to production versus dev, test, sandbox, QA environments. And lastly, we have defense in depth. This is where things like this Patch Manager to keep those vulnerabilities, everything up to date on your EC2 instances, as well as on your on-premise servers, if you have those, like I said earlier. Keep them up to date. You can use things like AWS Shield to protect layer 3 and 4 from such attacks as DDoS, and WAF at layer 7 to protect things like SQL injections, cross-site scripting. Now we have bot control as well. And then I'd be remiss if I didn't say we have many third-party security appliances in the marketplace that we know AWS doesn't have a solution for everything. That's why we have such a huge Amazon-provided network partnership. Detect. What techniques can identify these incidents, right? Well, in AWS world, one of the most popular tools we use is really conducting a well-architected review, focus on that security pillar. That can be done, right in the console by yourself. You can leverage AWS SAs, partner SAs. It's really one of the best tools to really give you that visibility in some of the best practices that you're not following, if you will. We have Amazon Inspector, right? You can search your AWS environment for any common vulnerability exposures that you have, any CVEs, right? They're still out there. Assess those instances against benchmarks. Fully automate notifying your security team, IT engineers, what findings are there. And then we have Security Hub. This was a fantastic tool, right? It actually is a single place that aggregates and organizes all of your security alerts and findings from multiple AWS resources, such as GuardDuty, right? Our threat detection service that uses machine learning, anomaly detection, threat intelligence. Macy, right? Another fully managed service to determine data privacy, uses machine learning there as well. Services like Inspector I mentioned, IAM. But Security Hub also has the ability to have north and southbound connectivities, right, for other third-party products. We know there's a lot of products that complete this picture, if you will, right, aligning to a NIST framework. So we have the capabilities to hook into those, right, as far as sending data out of Security Hub and receiving data from some of these products. And Security Hub continuously monitors your environment using automated security checks, once again, based upon AWS best practices and industry standards. And that's pretty cool. We have the self-assessment tool, right? We work to develop this inexpensive, easy to deploy, secure, fast solution to provide our customers with 2 different security assessment reports that specifically focus on ransomware. They're from open source projects in GitHub, Prowler, and Scout Suite. Each of these projects conduct an assessment based upon AWS best practices that can help quickly identify any potential risk areas in a customer's deployed environment. If you're familiar with CloudFormation or Terraform, they deploy very easily using CloudFormation. So quick to deploy, quick to tear down. Respond. What techniques can contain impacts of your incidents? Right? We have Detective. Actually just saw an announcement this morning. This now integrates with Splunk, I believe. Yeah, came out yesterday. It makes it easy to analyze, investigate, and quickly identify the root cause of potential security issues or suspicious activities. It collects log data from your AWS resources, uses machine learning, like some of our other tools there, does statistical analysis, graph theories to build a linked set of data that enables you to easily conduct faster and more efficient security investigations. And then once again, you have Security Hub, right, that I mentioned earlier. It also has the ability to create remediation based upon the findings from all the tools that aggregate it through it. So you can automatically resolve any of those misconfigurations if you choose to have it fully automated. And back in the old days on-prem, right, it was not easy to do that. Security engineering in the cloud just has made it so much easier because of these tools and all the APIs available to us. And recover, right? What techniques can restore capabilities? Of course, we have our AWS backup. It can be used in conjunction with Storage Gateway to enable you to centralize and automate your data protection across AWS services. I actually have a new feature where it does compliance, so you can actually ensure that it's compliant with what your policies are and the restores can be done. Cost-effective, fully managed, policy-based, simplifies it at scale, supports regulatory compliance or business policies for your protection. It works hand in hand with organizations. You want to put a policy across different business units or organizational units, you can do that. And we have S3, right? Been around, one of the oldest services, used heavily for recover and data backups. You still have such features as the cross-region replication. Recently added multiple destinations. So if you're global and want to have data replicated to multiple destinations as part of your recover plan, you can. We have the standard version of objects, the multi-factor authentication delete, bucket lifecycle policies, so you can move data to Glacier, that long-term storage, and prevent it from being deleted, as well as object lock, right, which is based upon the worm model, that write once, read many, to protect your data. And you can put all of this into a backup vault if you'd like, which I can touch on that in a future slide here. And then lastly, right, as part of that DR strategy, we do have CloudEndure Disaster Recovery. Continue to replicate your servers, the OS, the system state of those servers, the databases, applications, into wherever you want, right, your target, whatever region that is. It's low-cost resources that are automatically provisioned and managed by CloudEndure Disaster Recovery. So basically, it's fully provisioned environments. It's only launched when you declare a true disaster or just having a drill. I mentioned backup vault on the last slide. I decided to throw this slide in here just to go a little bit deeper on that, because you may have heard the term air gap, right? I know I've spoke to many customers, and with ransomware, I feel like one of the buzzwords is I need an air gap copy of all my sensitive data. But in my head, how can you have an air gap without using physical media, right? We actually shipping tapes or what have you. Without that, it's truly not air gap, right? There are still connections. So to make this less cumbersome, more practical, what we see, at least AWS, is to create a whole separate account, right? And call that the vault account. In this particular screen here, you can see it's representing assets being protected are all on premise via storage gateway, but it's still applicable for resources being backed up within AWS. At the end of the day, you create a vault in your organization, you lock that down. You can do that with that service control policy I mentioned earlier, so that the backups you place that cannot be deleted, right? You can use a KMS key with a totally different permissions, right? Maybe you don't want the normal admin staff to have access to this vault. Maybe it's someone much higher up the food chain, a CISO, and someone beside them. Think about this as your crown jewels, right? And now you have full data loss in the event of a disaster. Your backups are encrypted, stored in a different account with a different permission boundary. Of course, if this was 100% in the cloud, you can do things like have a whole separate root of trust account, if you will. And by root of trust, it's basically a vault account that's not even the same organization as you. Totally separate that, just to really have that demarcation. So next steps, right? What should I do? At the end of the day, if you haven't aligned to a security framework, you want to do that. Categorize your applications and criticality. If you need to do business impact analysis, obviously if you haven't done that, you could do that. Create an incident plan if you don't have one. Test that incident plan. Make sure you test those restores. And then we just had a paper published literally last Monday, I believe, that is ransomware risk management on AWS based upon the NIST framework. So I dropped that link in there because I believe Ron has all the material posted in the handouts already. But at the end of the day, remember, we have a large partner network. I think as we heard Bob state, right, there's so many components to the NIST CSF. I mentioned some services that AWS can help out with, but once again, we have that large partner network because it's going to take a lot more, right? There is no silver bullet, as I said at the beginning. And with that, that is it, Ron.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much. You know, the key takeaway, and I think you stressed it there very effectively at the end, is that AWS, despite its literally hundreds of billions or trillions of dollars of resources, can only do so much. And it really is that shared security responsibility model that individuals need to pursue to ensure the optimal security. And that's why we're so glad to have so many companies who complement AWS. And that's one of the things that I also like to emphasize is that security is no longer an isolated silo. And so many people might have been more involved with security and managing the network infrastructure, the system administration. A lot of CFOs, CIOs, CEOs are looking at this and trying to move to the cloud for any number of reasons. And so what that requires is that security becomes pervasive as a mindset throughout your entire organization.